Well, welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks so much for joining with us. Well, last September, federal agents with guns drawn came to Mark Houck's home and took him away. All of this was done in front of his wife and children. Well, today he stands trial in what's being called the biggest criminal case in the pro-life movement.
Houck is charged with interfering with a clinic volunteer after an altercation in front of an abortion facility. CBN's Matt Gelka is in Philadelphia with the latest.
Jury selection is set to begin today here in Philadelphia in a trial that Mark Houck's attorneys say could have major implications for pro-life supporters and for how they're allowed to try and keep advancing their message. Houck's case has drawn national attention given the circumstances of his arrest last September. In an early morning raid at his home, federal agents took Houck into custody nearly a year after he and Planned Parenthood volunteer Bruce Love got into a physical altercation outside of a Philadelphia abortion clinic. Houck's attorney, Peter Breen, says his client was targeted for his pro-life advocacy.
Mr. Love had brought a private criminal complaint in the Philadelphia, the municipal courts. That case was thrown out because Mr. Love didn't show up for court twice. And so that is where the matter should have ended. But instead, the Biden administration wanted to make an example out of Mark Houck.
Part of the Justice Department's indictment alleges Houck attempted to, quote, injure, intimidate, and interfere with the Planned Parenthood volunteer because they were providing reproductive services. The DOJ calls it a violation of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or FACE Act. If convicted, Houck could receive a maximum 11 years in prison and a $350,000 fine. Houck, a Catholic sidewalk counselor, maintains he was protecting his son from a verbal assault from the volunteer.
Look, if this is allowed to stand, it's an invitation to abortion escorts to be very aggressive, because who's the Biden DOJ going to believe? The abortion escort or the sidewalk counselor? And the federal government can take any case it wants. You know, they can indict anybody they want. They can take any case they want to trial. And so if this is allowed to stand, it would create a horrible and dangerous precedent for sidewalk counseling across the country.
Houck's defense argues the FACE Act was never meant to cover volunteer abortion escorts, only clinic patients and personnel.
We've told the court that Mark is going to testify. So the defendant, he is going to take the stand. We intend to put him on the stand. And his son is intending to testify to talk about what he saw that day. And so this is really going to be, I mean, it's a big case. It's, you know, what I say, this is the biggest criminal case in the pro-life movement in my memory.
Houck's attorneys hope to have a pretty quick resolution, and there could be a decision by the end of the week. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Matt Gelka, CBN News.
Well, let's hope for a speedy trial, speedy decision, but it just underlines where we stand in the country today, that you can call out SWAT teams with, weapons to come raid a home. His attorney had already volunteered him. If you're going to bring charges, we'll bring him down in for booking. But no, they wanted to make some kind of media frenzy out of this and show people just how strong they are. And I think they're doing it for political points. So here you have Mark Houck living at home with his wife and children, and he gets arrested in a pre-dawn raid with, numerous FBI vehicles and agents. I mean, you look at the video of it, and you got to be kidding me. How many people does it take to arrest one man? You look at Roger Stone, a pre-dawn raid with assault weapons at his home, and the news media tips so that the cameras can be rolling as they do it. You look at Mar-a-Lago, and let's go serve a search warrant, and let's do it with assault weapons and plainclothes officers with no ID. You look at these things and go, what have we become? Are we looking at some kind of police state? The other side of it, you can firebomb a crisis pregnancy center, and there doesn't seem to be any consequences at all, any leads at all. You can put your classified papers in your garage, and it doesn't have a full-blown SWAT team descend on your residence. There's unequal treatment here, and it's quite obvious there's unequal treatment. And I hope the American public wakes up to it. And whether this is extreme on the left or extreme on the right, this doesn't belong in America. We are not a police state. In other news, California is rocked by another mass shooting. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. A suspect is in custody in the killing of 7 people. Police captured 67-year-old Chun-Li Zhao, and it was caught on video. He is suspected in Monday's shootings at 2 landscaping nurseries in the city of Half Moon Bay near San Francisco. Authorities don't yet have a motive, but he is believed to have worked at one of the nurseries. This latest episode of gun violence happening less than 48 hours after a man killed 11 people celebrating the Lunar New Year at a dance hall in Monterey Park Saturday. Well, turning to national defense, a new report states the United States would not be able to give long-term support to Taiwan in a potential war against China. According to a study by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Pentagon would run out of key weapons needed for Taiwan's defense in less than a week. America's supply of weapons is already at low levels due to support of Ukraine in its fight against Russia. At the current pace, defense production would not be able to keep up with the demand if China invaded Taiwan. The report calls on Congress to take a hard look at Pentagon stockpiles and make changes in protocols for weapons manufacture and export. Well, China is a top priority for the new Republican-controlled House, leading lawmakers to create a select committee to counter the Chinese Communist Party and defend American interests. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has more on the GOP strategy to combat the country considered to be America's #1 threat.
The House is making clear it's time to counter China's aggression and expose its strategy of undermining American sovereignty. This new committee is a signal Democrats and Republicans alike sense the urgency of acting now.
There is bipartisan consensus that the era of trusting Communist China is over.
The House voted overwhelmingly to create the Select Committee on China by a vote of 365 to 65.
As Secretary of State Anthony Blinken put it last year, China is the only country with both the intent to reshape the international order and, increasingly, the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to do it.
Representative Mike Gallagher, the pick to chair the committee, says its focus will be repairing supply chains, reclaiming U.S. economic independence, beefing up U.S. military posture, and preventing theft of American intellectual property.
The Select Committee will expose the CCP's coordinated whole-of-society strategy to undermine American leadership and American sovereignty while working on a bipartisan basis and with the committees of jurisdiction to identify long overdue, common sense approaches to counter CCP aggression.
7 Republicans and 5 Democrats will comprise the group, armed with the authority to hold public hearings.
We want the very best ideas. Doesn't matter where they come from. And at the end of the day, we don't need a majority and a minority report. We just need one philosophy with one principle, and America will be stronger for the future to come.
In a statement on the China Select Committee, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said, quote, House Democrats will work in a serious, sober, and strategic manner to evaluate our relationship with the Chinese government and to address the rise of authoritarianism globally. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Caitlin. Gordon, back to you.
Well, China is our absolute #1 rival right now. Russia has been proven to be quite weak in the war in Ukraine, and their economy has certainly been suffering, but China's economy is roaring. But here's their fundamental weakness. They live in an authoritarian state, and we saw the protests over the COVID lockdowns. They have not yet had their revolution to allow freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, free elections. As long as there's one party in charge, they will always be hampered by that. Can they achieve short-term goals? The answer is yes, if you mark short-term goals in decades as opposed to a full century. But do we have the time to say, okay, let's sit back and watch and wait for that revolution? And I think the answer quite clearly is no, we don't. So how do we respond? Well, we have to respond in the same way. And I applaud what Speaker McCarthy is doing. Let's create a bipartisan committee. This isn't a Republican issue. This isn't a Democrat issue. This is an American issue. If we're going to be competitive on the world stage, we need to act with one voice. And I don't know about you, but for me, I'm very tired of the polarization that's happening in our politics because it's hurting us on that world stage. We seemingly had the luxury of doing it when we were dominant, but now that China is a very serious challenge, we have to respond very seriously. What are our strategic interests going forward? Can we agree on that and forge bipartisan ties to achieve that? I think we all need to understand this is very important, and we have to do it.